Welcome to the WakeUp Protocol. I am your host, Nadja Haldimann, and together we're having life-changing conversations with real people about spiritual awakening and the transformations that follow. We're mapping the messy path of awakening so you can go further faster and feel a little less alone along the way. For this episode of the WakeUp Protocol, I'm joined by Darek Mazzone, Polish-born DJ, filmmaker, and cultural connector, whose life has been shaped by the way music opens the heart. His journey began in communist Poland, secretly listening to records from Cuba, Angola, Mozambique, and Vietnam, which for him were tiny portals into worlds he could feel long before he could travel there. That spark eventually became decades of championing global music on KEXP and exploring music as a pathway to understanding. Darek's awakening unfolded through travel, service, and deep listening, from doing humanitarian work at refugee camps in Jordan to villages in Nepal, from Sufi rituals in Morocco and Turkey to the traditions that inspired his nonprofit, Sama, Music and Art. His new film, Sama, To Listen, captures this journey and reveals music as an ancient technology for healing, presence, and connection. In our conversation, we explore music as medicine, the spiritual power of rhythm and trance, and how shared vibration lifts us into something bigger than ourselves. Darek reminds us that awakening happens in community, on a dance floor, or in a single song that opens doorways inside of you. I hope this story invites you to listen a little more deeply to yourself and to the world. Darek Mazzone, welcome to the WakeUp Protocol.
Thank you, Nadja.
It's such a pleasure to have you on this podcast. I have been a huge fan of your show at KEXP for probably 25 years, and you have been a huge impact on expanding my music collection for myself over the years. You've introduced me to so many international artists. I know both you and I are immigrants, so there's definitely that connection that we have and that love for music that's coming from all kinds of diverse backgrounds and cultures. Yeah, and one of the things that I really appreciate about you is how you're creating connection through music. I know both you and I are both big connectors. And as a connector, there's an innate need that we just need to make sure that people find their way to each other. And what a beautiful way to do that through music. And I would like to have you maybe start by sharing a little bit how you found your love to music. What was the beginning of that?
A bunch of ways. I would say when I was growing up in Poland, my mom was a single mom and I'm an only child. So I spent a lot of time alone. And we had a collection of records, and small one, Eastern Europe. It's not like everybody's, unless you're in the party, you're not getting much. And it was also during communism. Mm-hmm. So we didn't really have access to the amount of things that were coming from the West. It was actually quite illegal at times to have Western music. But Poland was part of the communist world, and there was some very interesting exchanges between Cuba, Angola, Mozambique, Vietnam, China to an extent. So I had a small collection of music from all of these different cultures that I found interesting, but also at that particular time period, there were these emulations. You would see a Polish band or East German band with sombreros because they were really into that particular vibe, or Brazilian music. Music is still one of those things that transcends language, culture, political borders, etc. And I really fell in love with this stuff and kept listening to it over and over and over again. And it took me on this beautiful journey, trying to figure out where they were, what was going on there. And it started to become a really powerful connector to other parts of the world and other times in the world. It was a tiny collection, but it was definitely something. I was like, okay, there's something going on here. It was also powerful because I didn't need to know anything about those cultures. I didn't need to have a degree in history or anything from that. The music explained it to me in a really interesting way as a little kid. And so that was also a light bulb went off. And then when I moved to America, I saw my first concerts, like big productions per se, and that just blew my mind. Like, the first 3 shows that I had were like, okay, I want to be involved with this thing because it was so euphoric. And the fact that we were sharing it together. So there was this moment, me alone, my mom is working, I'm stuck in the house, listening to the same things over and over again. And suddenly this thing with thousands of people in a concert hall, really creating something fabulous. And then small settings, 10 people, a little acoustic show. It was like, I really got a sense that there's an exchange going on here, and I wanted to play a part in it.
I absolutely love the story that you're telling, how you were in Poland during the communist times, and there really wasn't that much access, or maybe it was even a little bit forbidden to listen to those things.
You would get it, if you did it multiple times, you would go to jail.
Oh my goodness. And so the forbidden fruit is always the most exciting. So, and then having access to that, then music is such a powerful way to change my frequency whenever I need to get into a different state of mind. When I feel down, I turn on some music and automatically my energy changes and I feel better. And so having that forbidden fruit and diving more into that sounds amazing. And then also just the fact that once you came to America and you really experienced connection in those live shows. And I know live shows is something that you're really championing, and you have a nonprofit organization that's called Sama, where you're connecting musicians from around the world and bringing them to Seattle. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about what that's all about and what that does for Seattle and the world.
Sure. So Seattle's a beautiful town, but it's not a major destination for a lot of artists, especially the artists that I'm focusing on, artists that are working with tradition, exploring ancient concepts in new ways too. It could be electronic, could be all different types of forms, but the music tells me something about where you're from, not just what you've been listening to. This is a bit of a longer story, but basically once the wall came down in Eastern Europe, there was no interest in music of that region. You were speaking to this. The forbidden fruit was so intoxicating. Once it was available, everybody just got massively drunk on it. It was just more and more. And so there was a whole slew of bands that started coming out at that time that were basically their cover, like the Eastern European version of The Cure, the Smiths, or anything that was popular in the West. So all of the traditions, they were just shunted aside. Nobody cared about that at all. After a period of time, a lot of these artists started to reflect on like, what is it? What am I doing here? Because music is powerful. Once you hear a song, you want to hear it again. If you really fall in love with it, it becomes like, no, wait a second. I want to hear this. I want to have this in my life now. Like a cuisine. Like I remember the first time I had Thai food, it was like, well, I grew up on delicious food, but not that. And then
I can completely relate to the Thai food. That was such a flavor burst in my mouth that I could not have imagined.
Exactly. And then you're like, more of that. I want to keep doing that. And same with music. You hear something for the first time, you're like, okay, something's going on here. So a lot of these artists were like, wait, I'm just a cover band. I'm emulating this thing. This isn't my story. The music of these bands that I love, that's their own particular trajectory. They got there through a whole bunch of things, a bunch of histories. That isn't who I am. So these bands like Warsaw Village Band and others went to the villages and started listening to the old players. And we're like, wait, there's something going on here that is connecting with me. These songs are almost tapping into a genetic history that is mine. And they started to explore that and create their own versions of that. They weren't interested in like creating a classical music, like it has to sound exactly like it was done 200 years ago. They started working with dub, with reggae, with electronic music, all these things, collaborating with other artists, but they wanted to share their tradition. They wanted to create something that was of their history, but yet for now. And so with Sama, I'm finding these artists all over the world. There's a whole generation, multiple generation that want to share who they really are, not just what they emulate. what you see in pop music. And it's not a criticism of pop music. I love pop music. It's all good. But for what moves me and what moves my audiences is to bring that narrative, bring those stories that don't need to be written and explained, that you hear this and suddenly you're getting a sense of the forest, you're getting a sense of the longevity, the history, the fact that these songs, these structures, these tones have survived for thousands of years. And here they are, just as relevant, as powerful as ever, but transmutated into something that works today, that has a growth, that has, once again, is like the garden. And as more seeds are falling in there. So that's Sama. We're bringing these artists in from all over the world. We put them in various places. We don't have like a one venue. So we work all over the region and we find ways to create opportunities for people to learn. We do a lecture beforehand with a scholar talking about the music. And then we bring in a restaurant or a caterer that's actually offering a veggie and non-veggie meal so people can talk to each other. Because one of the things that I find in these scenarios is that when people go to a show, even though they might not talk to each other, being together, and Sama means together, really lifts their spirits. It counters loneliness. And if they do start talking to each other, that's great. Then, actual connections are made. But they don't have to. They can still be introverts. But I want them to go out more and more and more because that exchange from the artist to the audience around themselves, the person listening and viewing with themselves, it elevates their energy and makes their day, their life just a little bit better. I've seen this happen. I've seen, we just put on a show with an amazing Pakistani artist, and it was a huge South Asian community in the audience, but also non-South Asians. Like they trust me. I've been doing this for so long, and I'm building a brand around this. And they come in and they're like, this is amazing. Please do more of this. I'm like, I'm trying. And it's working. I mean, if it's a little hard right now, artists from different parts of the world, since 9/11, getting visas is difficult. There's a cost factor, but we're working on it, and it's been quite successful.
That's so incredible how you're creating these spaces for people to connect through music to each other. And the fact that you're adding food to it is really powerful too, because there's different ways that we connect, and just the primal things of food, music, and dance are sort of what humanity has been doing for eons, and bringing just the simplicity of things back in this time of AI-generated content, fake news, and all the artificial stuff. Really, I'm feeling this is part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast too, because I want to have real conversations with real people about the journeys they're going on and what's actually behind, their lives, and what's getting there from feeling isolated and stuck and confused and lost to feeling connected and in a higher state of consciousness where they can be in joy and love and peace and happiness. And music is just so beautiful for that. I personally grew up in a musical family. My grandmother was a piano teacher, and my grandparents had huge Bach collection and classical music and jazz. And my dad always danced in the living room, and my parents, they did swing dancing too. And music was just always part of my life. And to this day, there's very little time that I am by myself alone in my house and not listening to music. And again, your music has introduced me to so much international music over the years. And I've gone into Spotify and created radio stations from those just as like the beginning. You have just this beautiful ability to source these artists and then give us little windows into these worlds so we can then do our own research and go deeper.
Thank you.
Are you traveling the world a lot to find these artists, or how do you get to them?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've been doing this now I started in Boston at college radio. So I've been doing this pretty much nonstop for 36 years. I do travel a lot. My career takes me in different directions. I've done a long stint in technology, and I'm still in that space. I started working with AI in 2015. And I've done a stint in advertising and marketing and events, and that involves traveling all over the world. And now I'm being asked to speak at various conferences about all these different subjects. And so I do end up there, and often when I'm there, there's a music component to it. So I am always looking. And as soon as I find like a particular genre evolving, like the one I just described to you, this interesting look at tradition. I was just in Riga, Latvia, and that's a very fascinating place. You know, it's a funky neighborhood, shall we say, with a interesting history. It's a country, it's not a country, it's part of this, it's part of that, but the nature of the place, the music, the tradition, the food have survived all the various empires and machinations within the borders changing. And so there is a resurgence of trying to let people know what it is to be Latvian, what it is to speak this language and have this culture, and music plays a part in that. There's a band called Top Metas. It's 5 women from Riga that incorporate a bunch of different genres, but their vocal style is tied to this like 5 women singing together. Their costumes are really beautiful, and they're presenting what it is to be Latvian on Eurovision. They ended up being a finalist. And so, you know, it's an opportunity for them to present who they are, not in a nationalistic way, but in a cultural way. And so I'm seeing more and more of these kinds of artists come through. So, you know, my journey is like, great, I get a chance to hear this, and I want to bring it back and play it on my radio show, because I've been doing this in Seattle since the early 90s. There was no streaming. You know, in order to get this music, you needed to buy the record, which wasn't cheap. Imports were a fortune. You know, I looked through my old CD collection, and I'm like, oh man, if I would have put that in Amazon or Microsoft stock at that time, it would have been a much more potent investment. But at the time, I needed to have that music because I fell in love with it, and I wanted to share it with my audience. So have a huge collection, able to share that, make that work, and people trusted me. Now people still trust me, even though they don't need me anymore to find music, because everything right now is just available anytime you want it. So it creates a sense of ephemerality to it. Like people, once you bought a record, you had to listen to it. And, you know, and even though there was a song you might not have liked initially, after a few listenings, it's like, no, that's my favorite song on a record. It's kind of like, if you have too much sugar too soon, it gets kind of flat, but something that's a little bitter, you kind of grow to it. And it's like, wait a second, something's going on there. Now people, you know, what's a record? You know, it's like, okay, it's one song, second song, the way the algorithm is working for you, quote unquote, or not for you. That sense of discovery really isn't there, because the algorithm doesn't know the things that are going on with you. It doesn't create that kind of exchange. It just tries to feed you different things. And mind you, I love algorithms. This isn't a judgment like all is bad. I'm too old and too smart to put everything in a bucket like that. Ridiculous. But in this exchange, what does this do? What is this spiritual aspect of music, and how that vibration creates an exchange between you and the person making it? That you can't put that into an algorithm, because it changes the way you change. It's the difference between when you go to a show and it's a live drummer, and that drummer is reacting to the audience, reacting to the rest of the band, reacting to whatever's going on with them. It's different each time, because it's a unique experience that is connected to the vibration of the space. If you have a bunch of dancers there, that rhythm is changing based on the dancers and how they're actually affecting it. So it creates a unique, wondrous experience each time that is so powerful and potent, and then it's gone. And the only way it lives is within you. And so you carry that on. And so it doesn't...
Yeah, that's so beautiful. How are you explaining that? Because whenever my guests talk about spiritual awakening, it's always coming back to your truth in the present moment. It's that ephemeral thing that's only happening when it's happening, and then it's gone. And so, yeah, music is so beautiful in that way. I know you've done a lot of humanitarian work too with music all over the world. Would you be open to sharing maybe a couple of those things? I know you were in Jordan, for example, doing some work there, in Nepal as well.
Yeah. So Amman was an interesting experience. This was at the beginning of the Syrian civil war. And I ended up in Amman to help with creating a way to educate refugees. And I was there with a particular project where we were looking to help refugees learn how to code. Because the reality of a refugee situation is the average time that you're a refugee, average, it changes each time, but it's around 40 years. Once you're in, half of Amman is Palestinian refugees, and they're not citizen. So they can't really work. And so I was at the Zatri refugee camp, which at the time was the largest refugee camp in the world. And it was basically housed. Like people couldn't leave per se to go work someplace because those jobs were for Jordanians. So we were trying to figure out like, okay, how do we make sure that these, most of them young people, don't get re-radicalized? And the only way to do that really is to give them some sense of value. So I was there with a group and we were teaching basic coding skills so that these refugees could become members of society. This is the pre-Upwork and Fiverr where you could actually offer your services all over the world. But we were thinking that this was coming, stuff was starting to happen. But when I was there, I was realizing that, wait a second, there's a whole group here that is limited from where they're from. But one of the things that really works is music. And if you're offering something in a band or in a setting, nobody cares where you're from because you're presenting something beautiful to them. So I was there to help develop a live music ecosystem. So we found a few cafes that were like, okay, we can turn these places into a venue and create an opportunity for people from Syria, from Palestine, from Jordan to play together. But that involved like a whole process. Okay, it's like, how do you become a publicist? How do you bring in a sound engineer? How do you make sure it sounds good? An art director so you can create posters and flyers. And Jordan has that scene in there, but it's not that robust because Amman, it's like you make a stopover to go to Petra. You go someplace else. So we're like, if we develop this thing here, people will want to stay. They'll want to actually spend some time, so it'll become an economic boon to the region, and it'll become an interesting story because people such as myself and you and others will want to spend some time in Amman because there's a scene there. There's something happening. Something's drawing people in. And I experienced that when I got here in the 90s. Like Seattle in the early 90s was bizarrely the center of the universe for a moment because of the music scene here. That's how it made its name for itself. People didn't really connect it to Boeing or lumber or something. Music was the thing that still resonated with them and still does. So it was an interesting project. We're like, okay, we've got this crew. We put a contest together. We brought in all of these different populations from the camps. It was a process to make it all work. And we were just about to see what was going to happen with it. And then COVID hit. And so everything got to shut down. But it's something that I'd love to explore in the future. And a similar situation in Nepal. This was right after the earthquake. And we were looking to find ways to create a startup ecosystem in that country, because after the earthquake it's a tragedy, but it's also an opportunity. And the same with the Zatri refugee camp, because suddenly you have people that are, they could be just shepherds for generations. The conflict brings them together and it becomes an accelerant. They suddenly learn how to code. They learn different educational techniques, and all of these different things accelerates that culture quickly. But then you got to figure out what to do with it. We had the same situation in Nepal. With Nepal, there was the kind of like the beginning of cloud infrastructure. And we were looking at how do we make Nepal a destination for developers and architects to come and help build that. And so we were looking at like, hey, we got the Himalayas here. I know a lot of developers that love to climb. Why don't you come here? You're not going to make a lot of money, but every weekend you're freaking climbing the Himalayas. So we're able to help build a bit of that infrastructure so that the economy of the country can come back a little more robust. The political situation and the poverty situation in Nepal is really harsh. It's a beautiful, fascinating, striking country, but it was also eye-opening to what you can and what you can't do. But we're still trying.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really beautiful work that you're doing, and really a lot of foresight too, doing things where you're trying to help give people the skills that can be used in an international way, kind of like you're doing with music, really thinking globally rather than locally to help connect people and empower people in that way. So it's very inspiring to hear the work you're doing. And I know you're doing, or you just finished a feature film documentary about music, also called Sama. And I want to start pivoting a little bit more into the spiritual and what the impact of this music was on you specifically. So maybe we can start with the movie. We ended up meeting at Imagine Festival in September, and that's where I invited you to be a guest on this show. And you showed me a little trailer. Actually, it wasn't even little. It was actually a pretty long one of the documentary.
That's a classic trailer let.
Okay, it was so beautiful and such high quality. I was just really excited to see it soon. And I know in January 29th, I think it's going to be at the Northwest Film Festival for the first time.
We're screening. It's a Northwest Film Forum. It's
Forum.
Yeah, we're screening it for the first time. We did a private screening on Orcas Island. And then this one's the first one that it's actually like open to the public. You buy tickets. And then we're going to have a little bit of a chat at the Unicorn, which is a great little space across the street. Yeah, this is an interesting experiment with the film because before I tell you about the film, we're in a middle time right now. This is kind of part of my philosophy. We're kind of like in a chrysalis where we don't quite know. You know what a chrysalis is?
Absolutely. It's the state between the caterpillar and the butterfly where everything turns into goo.
It's all goo. We're in goo.
We are in goo.
we're like music as an example. There was a way you used to release music, and the way if you build an audience, you made records, you sold those records, and then you did a live show, and you could sell like 10,000 records, and that would be enough for you to live and make more music. You do 10,000 streams, that's like $2 if you're lucky. So that goo doesn't work anymore. It's like, so we don't quite know what works and what doesn't work. Like people aren't buying records. They go to shows, but there's not enough for people to do this. So you're seeing people try to figure out, what am I going to do here? Because I'm so compelled to make this music. This isn't like I could try this or I could try that. I need to do this. I'm expressing something here. So the same with film. I've done different films before, shorts and others, and maybe 200 people would see them at the most, but it would make an impact. Now you could release something and you could have 10 million people see it, but they forget it because there's so much noise. And it's just this whole process of like, what am I doing here? I'm experimenting with going back to the future, quote unquote, where I was trying to explain this to my daughters when David Lynch passed. And I was explaining how when Blue Velvet came out or Eraserhead came out, it was playing at a movie theater. And it had a limited run because you had the celluloid. And that celluloid moved from movie theater to movie theater. Everybody who knew went to see it. And then they went to a cafe or a bar and talked about it. And it became this experience. And then the next day you met your friends and you talked about it again. Because it was this mutual experience that you had together.
I remember that time when we went to see a movie and then we talked about it. And I haven't seen many movies in theaters since the pandemic, maybe a handful. But what I noticed is I have this desire to talk about them. And people aren't doing that anymore. Something was missing. My soul was really drawn to have that conversation, and I didn't get that need fulfilled by not having that conversation. So I've never actually thought about that. I just felt the pain of not having the opportunity to discuss it, because that's part of the integration that actually makes it stick.
Exactly. And I made my film specifically for conversation because the film is about how music affects, how it is created. And we filmed this in Morocco with the Isawa and other groups who create trance rituals with this music. And for them, it's a therapy. And so people come in, it's almost like, in the States, we take a drug. Not all the time, there's talking therapy, etc. But for them, this ritual of extracting the jinn and creating more balance is like therapy. People come in and they have this experience. And then in Turkey, we met with various groups, Shirahi and others, Sufi traditions. who incorporate the same thing, this vibration, doing it together, creating a form we call the zikr, when you dance and sing together at the same time to create a trance-like state. And then in Malaysia, looking at the Islamic, pre-Islamic animist traditions within this, and how is this treated as a healing ritual? How does this work to get people connected and heal them in one form or another? And not like, we're taking a snake bite out of you, or et cetera. Though there are forms like that, like in southern Italy with the tarantella, the song of the tarantula was done. There was a lot of spiders in southern Italy. So this music was to help you to heal from spider bites. But in other places, this is a long conversation, but it's like, I got really deep into it. But it's this, how does this music affect you? How it affects me, how it affects my two hosts, Peter Kulshaw and John Goodfellow, how we go through these places and we talk to instrument makers. Like in Istanbul, what inspired them to create this instrument that actually does that transmutation of this, and vocal styles and all that. I wanted to create this to spark a conversation amongst people there as we look at going through life, aging, growing, and what role does music play in that? Because for me, I understand what I'm feeling at a particular time that a piece of music is playing. And I understand it not in a cognitive level, but in an emotional level. We have the same feeling. There's a quote by the poet Rumi that kind of reverberates with me right now, and that is, people who often speak the same language don't understand each other at all. But people who have the same feelings understand each other clearly. And so when I'm in that space, when I'm having that kind of musical experience, I understand what I'm feeling. And once the music stops, I don't exactly know what I'm feeling. Like, I don't have that. Maybe it's because I'm an only child, maybe because I grew up in Eastern Europe, maybe because I'm a man, there isn't that feeling. And for me, there's another aspect to it. I discovered really early that when I start getting verklempt, weeping just a little bit, the music is affecting me in that way. And it's really good. And it becomes intoxicating. So now, like, if I'm at a show and I'm feeling myself, like tears are coming, that's a good show. There's something happening there. Not all the time, obviously I'm at a club or something like that. There's no reason for me to be. It's a different kind of experience. But if it's that, like, you are connecting to me, that resonance is actually causing a physical reaction, and that is making my eyes wet. And so there were so many moments like that with my film. It looks like we're going to be selling out on January 29th, but if it works well, we'll do more screenings. Also with the intention, like, let's talk about it. Not for the sense of my ego. It's like, I don't need people going like, oh, you're great, Derek, etc. But to spark that conversation with each other and like, what are we doing here? What's going on? What's our journey?
Yeah, I can so deeply relate to that connection that people feel for each other, and even that joy that they can feel in themselves by being in music and doing music together and singing together and dancing together. It is so healing. Music is medicine. It's the most powerful medicine that I personally know, because it literally restructures my frequency, my vibration inside of my body. And it's such a sophisticated technology. And I've been in a kirtan circle at one point where we all sang, and I just felt the vibration singing together with others I don't have the words for it. It's something I feel, and it's incredibly powerful.
It is. It's also interesting because it's like, you don't have to be a good singer.
Yeah.
It's like, you might not be good if it's just you and 2 or 3 people, but if it's like 20 of you, you could suck, but it sounds amazing. Just being together and singing like that. Obviously, if you're all good, then it creates this whole other level. I mean, I've been trying to find ways to bring more of this South Asian Qawwali, Carnatic music. And we're doing a show actually on Vashon at the Vashon Center for the Arts with Ganesh Rajagopalan on March 6th. He's a Carnatic violin player. Just got nominated for a 2nd Grammy. Go Ganesh.
Wow.
And he's local. So, that's the other thing that's interesting about Seattle, is that there's a lot of people here because there's so many immigrants here, and there's a lot of people been here for a long time. There's a lot of these different traditions, and we're trying to find ways to create that kind of experience, but do it in a way where, like, you can participate. It's fine. You're going to sound good. It's going to be fine. There's a whole bunch of this where I'm like, people want you to succeed. As I was telling you with my teenage daughters, they, one is a singer, they're all trying different things. And it's like, when you're on stage, people want you to succeed. They're not looking to pick on you because you're failing. They're there to celebrate you.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to realize that. But it's that process of you're sharing something of yourself. It creates a resonance. And with the Qawwalis, it is a science for them. They will be performing harmonium, tabla, drums, etc., and this ancient vocalization to emulate Allah and Ali and all that. And it's not even like this, it's specific to this. It's like, you have to believe this, this, and this. It's raising your spirit. And they can actually sense in the space where it's needed. And they will actually go like, okay, we need to put our channel, our energy, like chi, like in Qigong, like you're channeling that energy into that space, and everybody's suddenly feeling it. I had this literal experience in 1995. I was at the Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan show at the Paramount Theater when he was artist in residence at the University of Washington. I would listen to him practice as I'm going to KCMU before it became KEXP. And that show, everybody was in the audience because at the time, he was working with Eddie Vedder on the Dead Man Walking soundtrack with Sean Penn. So there was like Hollywood, and also in the 90s, Seattle, Hollywood there was a really interesting mix of stuff. It's Microsoft stocks had just split for the first time. And so suddenly everybody had cash and they're like, what are we doing here? What's going on? And that show had everybody in it. And it was like, we were elevated. My wife was like, what the hell just happened? What's going on? And we still talk about it. And that actually was one of the inspirations for Sama. When I and my friend John Goodfellow, who's my co-founder, we're like, we need to do more of this. We need to bring more of these kinds of experiences because it is ancient, and yet it's ancient in that way where it's still relevant today. It's something that could be thousands of years old, but somehow works today. And that to me is the deep focus of my work right now, of like, what is still working? What is still there? Not from a place of dogma, but it's able to survive. Like when we bought our house here about, oh my God, it's 9 years now. Time ain't no joke. We were asking a friend of ours who's a gardener, like, what should we do here? Because I had a nice garden. He's like, just see what's still alive, because the house wasn't being taken care of for a few years. And I'm looking at that from that perspective, like, what is surviving? What can we learn from that others have worked on? When I was younger, I thought that I had to, a little crazy anarchist. It's all blah, the old is blah. Now that I'm older, obviously, this is such a cliche, but it's true. Like, what works? What has survived the test of time? What has survived in Riga, empire after empire, or Poland or others, and is still feeding me, feeding others, can still change and become relevant for today without losing its essence, without becoming something that is like, okay, I don't know, what is this? Where is that? We just talked about Thai food. 500 years ago, I could be in Bangkok and eating that same food. And it would be just as powerful. Those spices and everything would be just as powerful. But it could be different. It could be something that's in a taco or something and still have that kind of energy. Like, how does this all work? We're in this really interesting chrysalis.
Yeah.
We quite know where it's going to be.
I really like how you're almost being a scientist about what's the things that are surviving over time, the test of time. There are many things. And when we really look at it, it's the very simple things like music, like food, nature, of course, as the main teacher. And I love the fact that you looked at your garden to see what survives. I do the same thing in mine. I'm like, what are the native plants that know how to survive? Yeah. Why would I put in an irrigation system if I can just put in the plants that already know how to thrive in the environment where I live? Yeah. So it sounds like you had this really powerful experience with that music, feeling elevated or even maybe levitating in a sense, slightly out of body experience. I don't know if that's what you have.
It was for all of us. It was literally like, what is a drug? What are those things? So we've had those. I did a stint with Contact Improv, and I had out-of-the-body experiences when I'm just working with different with dancing. I'm a DJ. I've created, magical moments on a dance floor. And those magical moments didn't come from listening to the things you already know. It's moving your body and moving to something you never heard before. The first time I played Afrobeats, I remember this, because once again, I'm a nerd, and I would go out and I would have my money would go to records when I'm DJing. I barely survived because I needed to play those records. I needed to have my audience listen to that and dance to it. And we connected when we're both hearing something, and it's in a sense the first time for them hearing a particular rhythm, like a new cumbia or something, or like a Yoruba chant. And they are just elevated. They're moving their bodies, which automatically turns them into a little funky space. We saw that in Imagine a bit. And when it's ancient, like when we brought the Sami brothers there, they're like, what is happening here? You get this sense of like these old men from Pakistan or Morocco or Malaysia or especially Turkey, like, what is going on here? How are we connecting? Or old women, doesn't matter. But we're somehow feeling the same feeling.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
we want to stay in that space.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if you had other moments of those, let's just call it spiritual awakening. This is really the theme of this podcast. Have you had any pivotal moments of spiritual awakening, and what did those look like?
There's a bunch. I mean, obviously, Nusrat and Jujuka and all these other musicians that have come through, and classical settings really opened me up. Like, it wasn't like this one moment. It was I realized that this is the journey that I should be on, because it just resonated. I was able to find my way through this. I tried other things in other ways, whether it's career, relationships, all of these different things. And it's just like, this really isn't working. And it takes a long time to realize that you got to listen to yourself. You got to listen to what the universe is bringing you. And so with these kinds of things, that spiritual awakening really was, I knew it was working, because it wasn't like a moment that like, okay, you're time to put on the white robes and sit and pontificate. These are parts of a journey, and you're going to find other moments there. Like, I was in St. Peter's and at the Vatican, and it was after John Paul passed, and it really connected me with my heritage. Not in a way where my people are the best or anything like that. It was like, no, wait a second. I have this longevity. I have this story here. And I connected to it on a really powerful way that I was like, I need to weave that into my path. And before that, I was exploring Hinduism. I was exploring Buddhism. I was like classic, almost another cliche where like, okay, reading this book, deep into Siddhartha and Hermann Hesse, et cetera. It's like, no, wait a second. You've got some stuff here. There's a reason why this is going. And so spend some time in that space and look at your history and how it could help you grow to where you are right now. And then another powerful moment was when I discovered martial arts. Not like mixed martial arts, but an ancient Southern Chinese style of Kung Fu called Hungar. And I found an amazing teacher. And mind you, I didn't have a father figure in my life. And this Sifu was powerful because he didn't speak English at all. He spoke Cantonese, not even Mandarin. But he was able to share this ancient knowledge, which is thousands of years old, this system. And within the system, I found out later that like you couldn't teach it unless somebody had taught you that knew somebody had taught them. So it was like, you couldn't just put up a shingle saying, hey, I am this new teacher. They would take it down. It's like, I don't know who you taught this from. How are you learning it? And I was in Beijing, and I saw in an old museum with the forms that I was learning on like a bodhisattva statue, like a guardian at a temple. And I was like, that was a revelation that I learned a system that had nothing to do where I'm from. This is like China, Poland. Obviously Poland was not a country for, a few hundred years. So there's a lot of movement of Poles throughout the world. But learning that I was also getting this knowledge, getting this moment, that was a spiritual awakening. Seeing this bodhisattva and doing the same movements that I had been doing for years was a really powerful story. To me, the spiritual moments were connections. Like, it wasn't just in my head. I meditate, etc., but it was like suddenly I am vibrating with other things around me. And it's creating that sense of harmony within that. Those are the moments. And they still happen. Just had a band in from Estonia called Pulup. They played at Hidden Hall. We're doing shows all the time. And they play on this ancient instrument called the teleharpa, which is kind of like imagine a super rusty, crazy violin. And this instrument comes from an island off of Estonia that almost died out. And they brought it back to life. And the Estonian community came out and they started doing this particular dance, like a hora, a line dance as people are going through. And we all just jumped in. A bunch of people that I've known that would never do this. And we were just in talk. It's like this beautiful, amazing snake as they're playing this trance-like music. We're in it. We're like, this is phenomenal. And once again, we're connecting. We're holding each other's hands and we're moving through this line. That was a amazing spiritual moment. Not Estonian. And there's a whole other history there, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I find it so interesting that you're talking about connection in connection with the spiritual awakening. It's something that I'm very aware of, but I've never consciously put it together like that, even though it's always been there. But even if I think through my personal journey of the spiritual awakenings, my very first one was at Burning Man during the temple burn. And while it was very much getting into the present moment, into myself, it was that deep sense of connection that I felt because I was around all these amazing human beings who were all celebrating and grieving and holding it together with each other in this desert while the temple was burning and these little fire tornadoes were going around, and it felt very primal. But it was the connection that allowed me to drop into me. It's almost like in that matrix that we're in, there was an opening, the veil opened up, and it allowed my soul to remember that it is part of everything, and yet it is also itself. So I had both that connection to myself because of the connection to everyone else.
Yeah.
In the fact that you're sharing about contact improv dancing, it's something I've played with too for a bit. And what an amazing way, what a scary way. We're not used to connect in a physical way with people that we're not intimate with. And all of a sudden, here we are connecting with these people and dancing with complete strangers without words and just feeling each other and learning each other's language. This, how much are you listening? How much am I listening? How much am I going to share with you versus you with me? And it's that connection that, again, because of the connection, it also brings me then back to myself again. It's both.
And it's also important to realize that these things manifest in the most interesting places, like within a context of Burning Man and that the temple burn. That is an ancient ritual. That is the passing. That is tied to seasons. This is what you do when you burn your crops and you gather around a maypole. This is how you're connecting with life. This is how all of these passages are happening. And now it's manifested in Burning Man, which manifested through an old Russian movie. Well, not too old, Stalker. Did you see Stalker by Tarkovsky by chance?
I did not see it.
It's an amazing movie about a zone in Russia. Tarkovsky is one of my favorite directors, and it's a zone in Russia where there was a nuclear accident or something happened. Nobody quite knows, and they blocked it off. It's obviously pre-Chernobyl and everything else. And then suddenly, people that have seen the movie, and once again, this is pre-streaming, pre-VHS, they would see this movie. It was an amazing movie. They would talk about it. And this group in San Francisco would then do this, if you see the movie, there's a zone and you create a zone and you wander through that zone and it creates an experience. Like you're in touch with yourself in a really interesting way. That small group was doing these kinds of happenings. And from that small group, the idea of Burning Man manifested. And the origin story is relevant, but it doesn't need to overwhelm what comes after it. Like, how does that work? There was something about this story that still survives, but it's not as big, obviously, as Burning Man. And these organizations, Imagine Others, are evolving, because of the various people that are coming in and the energy. They're able to reflect what is needed from their community back to them. And that's why these things constantly evolve. So when I look at these things, I'm like, okay, that's a particular ritual, that's a ritual. Not to be like an academic about it, but just realize, okay, these are the things that are opening people up. You know, you see a fire, everybody's together, people are crying, they're letting go of something.
Yeah.
They're bringing in, sometimes people, you know, that's the time that they choose to exit. You know, people die at these places because that's their choice at that moment. And it's super sad. But it is part of that ritual. It is part of that experience, which is humanity.
Yeah. We're all longing for connection. And yeah, it's hard to access it these days. And yet there are containers that allow us to have that. And I'm always feeling drawn to those containers. And you're definitely one of the amazing humans who can help facilitate that for others. So thank you for doing that work. It's really inspirational. If you look at your life now versus before all of these downloads, these spiritual awakenings, what do you think is different?
Travel has been probably the biggest change for me. It's been the biggest blessing that I've had because it allowed me to actually spend time with people and realize how similar we are to each other. And also the differences between us are the things that are the most beautiful. And the things that resonate with us, going back to Thai food or anything like that. These are the gifts that we have from each other. It made me much less fearful. When I came to America, I couldn't speak English. I had no idea about the culture or anything like that. And I ended up in Boston, which is an old town, beautiful town, but also a rough and tumble town, which had like really interesting segments of immigrants, Irish, Italian. I also landed here just when busing started. And that was the attempt by the U.S. government to move kids from school to help with integration. And so suddenly I discovered racism. I couldn't speak the language. And, you know, my first friend was Black because I lived in a kind of a funky neighborhood called Dorchester. It was great. But it was also, I get beat up at, 9 because I have a Black friend. And Tony and his family were amazing. I couldn't speak English, but we understood each other. They turned me on to funk and soul, African-American music that I had never heard before. And just like we talked about Thai food, the first time you heard Earth, Wind, and Fire, or, any of that, you're like, what is this thing? This is amazing. It is so different from anything that I've ever heard before. So it was this realizing that I'm traveling, even coming here, being here, and going to other places. I flexed those muscles and I toned those skills to be open. Not be stupid, not like, accept anything that anybody says. I'm actually quite pragmatic about these things. As I described to you in the different things that I've studied, you got to prove to me that you know what you're talking about. You can't just go like, oh, I know. It's like, no, tell me. That's the process. It's just like, there are so many times in my life I've been the only white man on a plane in Western China. I've been wandering at night and people will just look at me and like, I take care of myself, but also I know what I present. I speak English. That's an amazing privilege all over the world. And, I have certain physical traits and other things that I'm like, I know I can do this, but I don't do it from a place of ego. I do it from a place of connecting and trying to connect. And that's also an important part of my film is that it was just like, as I was working with all of these artists and artisans, all of it kind of stemmed down to like, how do you shed your ego? How do you actually open yourself up to that? Same situation with contact improv, to work it. It's not about you. It's about you working together. It's like how, if you're just like, oh, wow, look at me, I'm doing this, you're missing the point. It's trained to create that harmony so that your partner can actually work together. Like in Tai Chi, there's a form called pushing hands. And you're working, you're trying to find those things that create that harmony.
Wow, you have so much depth. There's just so much. And I'm just really grateful that we have an opportunity to have this conversation and to learn from all your experience over so many decades. Now that we're having this conversation as very much as scientist, and at the same time, you're using your emotions and your feelings to help guide all of that. So it's that heart and mind connection, which is really beautiful. And the tarot, I always like to reference tarot cards. in the tarot, the Thoth deck that I'm really fond of. It's the Six of Swords, where it's like the mind and the heart, they work together to create something that's really beautiful and that people can really hear, a message that can actually penetrate through all the walls and get through. And music is a huge part of that and the way you're presenting it.
Thank you.
We are coming to the end of this recording, and I would like to give you a chance to tell our listeners how they can find you and any offerings you have.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been nice to actually share this and to force myself to put it into a narrative. Because, you live your life in the moments, and a retrospective is very interesting. I'm not interested in a retrospective. I feel like I'm just getting started in many ways, especially with Sama and other things. But it's good to be able to okay, does this make sense? Where are those connections when you reflect on your past? You can find me all over social media. I'm an early adopter, started with Friendster and then MySpace and then continuing there. I'm fascinated by making those connections. I'm not like, a TikToker where I'm just like, I'm doing this or that. I have to think about what I'm doing. Because for me, it's always been as a channel. I've been in radio for a long time, and there's many ways, like there's two types of DJs. There's the DJ that it's like, hey, this is me, and I'm playing this for you. And there's the DJ where like, here's the music. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. I tend to lean towards the latter. I like to bring people together. Like I have events in my house, we throw a couple of big parties, and I'm always about connecting. And same with my club nights, where we were throwing these huge Bhangra and Bollywood parties for the first time. And so many babies and marriages and stuff came out of those parties because these cultures came together for the first time. And people were like, what is happening here? So I'm into making those kind of connections. And so you can find me on samamusicarts.org. You can obviously find me at KEXP. And I'm really proud of that station becoming a platform which is recognized all over the world. We're doing shows all over the region. We're a nonprofit arts organization, so we're trying to build a strong base of donors and supporters and members. It's a new system for us where, I live in Seattle, I have friends in tech, I have support, but it's not about like, 2 or 3 wealthy individuals supporting us. It's about 2,000-3,000 relatively okay people giving us like, $2 a month and to create that sense of belonging and together. So that's it. The same with KEXP. And I'm traveling quite a bit all over the world. I'll be in Slovenia in February and then in Lithuania. I'm in New York for APAP and Global Fest. It takes work to find these artists, make these connections. And it's also important to realize that it's a level of trust because, and this is the most important thing that I'm trying to tell people, when somebody from Pakistan comes all the way to Seattle or Bellevue or Vashon to present you their music, their art, who they are, to their core, come to the show. You're going to remember it way more than you are doom scrolling or watching 9 episodes of whatever Netflix show you're watching right now. It's going to be good for you. So please look for Sama. We publish a calendar of all these interesting artists from all over the world that are playing everywhere here, and go to these shows. I'm trying to get people to remember how to go out to something you've not heard before, because it will be like first love when it connects with you like that. And don't go to the things that you already know. Do that at times, but take a risk. The payoff is amazing.
Diversity. It just really expands our experience so much. I will make sure to put all the links in the show notes so our listeners can find those very easily. And just before we end, I have one final question for you. If you could go back in time and give a message to a younger version of you, maybe that version that lived in Poland, what would you tell him?
I would tell him to, it's not your fault. You did everything that you could. And, parents divorcing, coming to a different country, not knowing the language, looking weird. There was a time, communism and all that. And you internalize that. You blame yourself for it. Like, why didn't people like me, et cetera? It's like, no, it's not your fault. Be less hard on yourself and hold space for yourself. I don't know if I would have paid attention exactly, but even having somebody tell me that at that age would have made things just a little easier. It wouldn't have changed much. That's one of the things that's interesting. Like, I'm a dad and I have 2 teenage daughters, and you want to take care of them, but then there's a point where you're like, this isn't helping you. This is, I'll be there for you and we'll be there, but you've got to do this now. You have to learn and fail and try again and hopefully get better each time. Yeah, that was the thing. There was a lot of processes to try to unwind that stuff.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. What a delight to have had this conversation with you.
Thank you, Nadja.
You're such an inspiration to me. And I just cannot wait to see all the magic you're going to be putting into this world and the connections you're creating, and also the awakenings you're going to help facilitate through the work that you're doing with the music and everything. So thank you so much for being you and doing that work.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wake Up Protocol. If you like what you heard, share this episode with 3 people who need to hear this message. And if you want to go deeper, head to thewakeuprotocol.com and sign up for our email list. That's where we share behind the scenes insights, bonus resources, exclusive invites, and the kind of guidance we only send to our community. And if this is the last thing you hear from us, all we'd like to say is keep going, trust yourself, follow your heart. Until next time, have a safe and happy journey.